You open your banking app, not because something went wrong, just to check. You've been saving for years. You've been responsible. You've avoided the obvious mistakes. You see the number and do the math in your head. $500,000, $500,000. For most of your life, that number meant something. Security, freedom, the finish line. But instead of relief, you feel uneasy because a quiet question creeps in. Is this actually enough anymore? If you've ever hit a savings milestone that should feel impressive, but somehow doesn't, you're not imagining it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. $500,000 in 2025 is not real wealth anymore. Not because you failed, not because you didn't work hard enough, but because the definition of wealth quietly changed while the story you were told stayed the same. You kept chasing an old finish line while the track kept moving. Let's unpack why that happened. Not to discourage you, but to help you recalibrate how money works now. Most of us were taught that wealth is about hitting a number, 100,000, 500,000, a million, as if crossing that line automatically flips a switch from stress to security. But money doesn't work like that anymore. For most of the late 20th century, $500,000 represented serious purchasing power. It could buy a home outright in many areas. It could generate meaningful interest income. It could cover decades of modest living. It was a real safety net. In the 1990s, $500,000 invested conservatively could generate maybe $25,000 to $40,000 a year without taking wild risks. And life was cheaper. Housing took a smaller share of income. Healthcare cost less. Education hadn't exploded yet. So $500,000 wasn't just a big number. It was genuine leverage. That world doesn't exist anymore. Inflation didn't just nibble at prices, it rewrote the math on what wealth means. Adjusted for inflation, $500,000 in the year 2000 would need to be well over $900,000 in 2025 just to match the same purchasing power. So if you hit $500,000 today, you haven't reached the old milestone. You've reached about half of it. And inflation didn't hit everything equally. It hit the essentials the hardest: housing, healthcare, education, insurance. These didn't grow at 2 or 3% a year. In many places, they grew at multiples of that. Which brings us to the real issue. $500,000 doesn't buy time anymore. Most people think wealth is a big pile of money. But what wealth actually buys is time. Time away from bad jobs. Time to recover from mistakes. Time to make calm decisions instead of desperate ones. So the question isn't, is $500,000 a lot of money? It's, how much time does $500,000 actually buy now? Let's do simple math. Assume modest living costs of $60,000 a year, already conservative in many cities. $500,000 divided by $60,000 is a little over 8 years. That's 8 years of basic living, before taxes, before healthcare surprises, before markets go against you, before future inflation. 8 years is helpful. It's not independence. This is where the famous 4% rule starts to crack. The old advice: withdraw 4% per year, adjust for inflation, and you should be safe. On $500,000, 4% is $20,000 a year. Can you live on $20,000 a year in 2025? For most people, clearly not. And the 4% rule was based on conditions that were very different. Cheaper housing, more stable inflation, better real returns after inflation and fees. Today, expenses are more aggressive and markets more volatile. So $500,000 doesn't generate confidence. It generates anxiety. Here's another key idea. There are two kinds of wealth: psychological and structural. Psychological wealth is how rich you feel. Structural wealth is how secure you actually are. Psychologically, $500,000 still feels rich. It sounds impressive. It looks good on a screen. It signals success. But structurally, for many people, it doesn't change the day-to-day. You still worry about healthcare. You still worry about market crashes. You still worry about inflation. If a number doesn't meaningfully reduce your stress, it's not real wealth. It's just a milestone. So how did 500,000 become the success number? Because wages stalled while costs kept rising. Income growth slowed. Expectations quietly shrank. 500,000 started to sound like you made it. But at the same time, housing took more of each paycheck. Debt became normal. Safety nets weakened. So we ended up in a weird place. 500,000 sounds like wealth, but behaves like a buffer. And buffers are fragile. Here's the important reframe. $500,000 is not useless. It's just misunderstood. It doesn't represent freedom anymore. It represents transition. At 500,000, you have protection, options, breathing room, but you don't yet have independence. True wealth today means your assets can generate income close to your living costs, absorb volatility, outpace inflation, and let you depend less on your labor. For many people, that starts closer to $1.5 to $2 million, depending on location and lifestyle. Not because people got greedy, but because the math changed. So what's the point if 500,000 isn't enough? The point is this. Stop treating 500,000 as a finish line. Start treating it as leverage capital. It buys negotiating power, career flexibility, risk tolerance, mental calm. It's the stage where structure matters most, because from here, either compounding starts working for you, or lifestyle inflation quietly eats everything. So if you're near this number, or working toward it, think in terms of time, not just net worth. Ask, how many years of life can this realistically support? Protect your margin. Keep fixed expenses lower than the culture tells you is normal. Design for resilience, not status. A boring but durable financial structure beats a flashy, fragile one. The financial system didn't just inflate prices, it inflated expectations. It taught people to chase milestones instead of building systems. $500,000 isn't the villain, the misunderstanding is. Once you understand what that number actually does and doesn't do, you stop feeling broken or behind. You start making clearer decisions. $500,000 in 2026 isn't real wealth anymore, but it is a powerful hinge point where anxiety can turn into clarity, where reaction can turn into design, where effort can finally start compounding instead of resetting. If this helped you see money differently, subscribe. This channel exists to explain the systems behind money, not to shame people for struggling inside them. Thanks for watching.